The DOJ is tying the 94-year-old to the deadly shootdown of two Miami planes flying over international waters in 1996 that were seeking to help Cubans escape the communist regime. 4 people were killed, and it happened as Castro was serving as Cuba's Minister of Defense. Castro is now charged with murder and conspiracy to kill U.S. nationals.
Congressman Carlos Gimenéz is the first Cuban-born U.S. representative, and Congresswoman Maria Elvira Salazar is the daughter of Cuban immigrants. They will join us in just moments.
Looking forward to that, but let's begin with Justice correspondent David Spunt, who is live in Miami there for us. David?
Sandra, John, a big day not only here in Miami, but across the United States. A member of the Castro family, is now facing a federal indictment here in the United States. Any indictment of Raul Castro or any member of the Castro family is welcome, especially to those Cuban Americans living in Miami and across the country who have felt such oppression. This news conference expected to start in about 15 minutes or so, honoring those 4 that died tragically 30 years ago, allegedly at the hands of Raul Castro, who allegedly gave that shoot-down order of those planes. Listen, Sandra, John, Raul Castro is 94 years old. He lives in Havana. He has no official role right now. However, he is still a kingmaker, no question. 30 years ago, as you mentioned, that 1996, that group of Brothers to the Rescue flew 3 planes to help people fleeing from the communist nation. They were over the Atlantic Ocean. 2 planes shot down. 4 people were killed. Raul Castro led the military, allegedly ordered that shoot down. As I said, Acting Attorney General Todd Blanche on hand in just moments, honoring the victims and announcing this indictment, which includes, as you mentioned, the big charge of murder. Now, today's news comes 1 week after CIA Director John Ratcliffe met with Cuban officials on the ground in Havana to send a message directly from President Trump regarding Cuba's future. Now, things on the island are grim: blackouts, gas shortages, to name a few. Again, this news conference begins in about 15 minutes or so. We'll bring it to you when it starts. The big question, though, will Raul Castro be brought to the United States? As we saw earlier this year with former Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro, we've tried multiple times, spoken to multiple sources and multiple agencies. No one will give us a straight answer on that question, but we know right now Raul Castro is facing this indictment, which includes the charge of murder for those 4 people that will be honored today here in Miami at the Freedom Tower. Sandra, John.
Good job talking over what seems like quite a bit of noise there. David Spunt, thank you. All right, John?
It is going to be a significant afternoon. All right, let's bring in the only Cuban-born member of Congress, Carlos Gimenéz of Florida, and Florida Congresswoman Maria Salazar, who is the daughter of Cuban exiles. Good to have you with us, folks, on what is a very significant day in terms of the wheels of justice finally turning here. Yes. You know, I half expected today to hear that there had been some sort of Maduro-style operation that went in and swept Raul Castro up and is bringing him to justice here in the United States. It doesn't look like that has happened. But Congresswoman Salazar, what do you think the overall effect of this indictment might be?
Well, thank you for the opportunity. And I just was telling Carlos that that scene that you guys are broadcasting is my district, is the heart of district number 27, the city of Miami. And today is a glorious day for our community, my community, Carlos' community, South Florida, because justice will be done. And we know that being indicted by a federal grand jury is very serious stuff. The first thing that I want to say is thank you, President Trump, because after 10 administrations, Republicans and Democrats, this president has had the courage to bring 2 Americans who were dead on the Florida Straits to justice. But not only that, is that Cuba is the #1 enemy in the Western Hemisphere for this country.
You know, an indictment is one thing. Actually bringing Raul Castro to justice is quite another, which is why I half expected to see him frog marched out there at this hearing this afternoon, this news conference this afternoon. If he is indicted and somehow brought to justice, Congresswoman Gimenéz, is this the sort of thing that could potentially cause the regime in Cuba to fall, or is he so far removed from Cuban politics that it doesn't really matter?
Oh, no. Don't ever make the mistake that somehow Raul Castro is far removed from the politics. Really, the ruling class, the government, really, there's a government inside a government in Cuba, is GAESA. GAESA is a corporation of military personnel that's headed by Raul Castro. They control 70% of the economy of Cuba. So indicting Raul Castro, and if we somehow bring him to justice here in the United States, is a very clear signal from this administration that there's a new sheriff in town. We're not going to be playing around with America's #1 threat in our hemisphere, which is Cuba, and then we mean business. I mean, Noriega found that out, I guess, in Panama. Maduro found that out a couple of months ago in Venezuela, and things are changing there. I would expect that something similar may be happening in Cuba. Now, what this does, it gives the President of the United States options that he can exercise in order to bring about the change that is needed, not only for the Cuban people, but for the security of the United States.
We have to put into context for your audience. Let's put into context for the average American viewer. Castro and the Cuba regime has been the platform, the launching pad for the last 60 years for enemies, Russia, China, Iran, Hezbollah, Hamas. Nothing good comes from Cuba. Unfortunately, the Cuban people are 11 million slaves. And this president, President Trump, is the one who is recognizing that and doing something about it. So this indictment is just one of many of atrocities that the Castros have committed. And we are very pleased that is happening today.
In terms of what Congresswoman Gimenéz said just a second ago, the president having options, he talked about that yesterday, and he seemed to suggest that regime change might not be one of the options that's highest on his list. Listen to what he said.
I don't know about changing the regime. I could do that, whether you change the regime or not. It's been a rough regime. They've killed a lot of people, but it's a country that really needs help. It has nothing. They can't turn on the lights. They can't eat. We don't want to see that.
I remember when I was working in Miami back in 1989, 1990, everybody was saying, wait until Fidel Castro dies, then everything is going to change. Jorge Mascanosa, Cuban American National Foundation, all those folks were saying it's going to be a big day when he dies. Well, Fidel Castro outlived Jorge Mascanosa by 19 years. And when he died in 2016, nothing changed. So this is an island, Congresswoman Salazar, that just seems to have crazy resilience when it comes to this regime. I mean, it's kind of like Iran.
And you're absolutely correct, but for me, in my view, there are two factors that are different. Number one, there's a new sheriff in town, as Carlos has just said. Trump is in the White House. And number two, they do not have anyone else to exploit. First, they had the Russians, then they had Maduro, and then they had the Venezuelans. Right now, even the Mexicans, we have told them, don't help them, because Cuba does not produce anything. The only thing that produces evil and repression. So for that reason, we do know that after this indictment, things are going to change, because the Cubans don't have food, electricity, water, medicine, nothing. And the overseas Cubans, we in Miami, we're more than ready to help them and to help the United States to create freedom and democracy. So it's a different scenario as in when Fidel died.
Yeah, one other thing is that this is not Iran. Cuba's not Iran, and there are demonstrations happening every single night in Cuba. The people are starting to rise up, and I do disagree with the president. You cannot deal with this regime. In order for us to give them help to the Cuban people that they desperately need, there needs to be political change. This regime is one that has thousands of political prisoners. It has not had any kind of elections in over 65 years. It is an enemy of the United States. And unlike Iran, which may be 5,000, 6,000, 7,000 miles away, this is 90 miles away from our shores. And so we just learned that they also have a cache of some 300 to 400 drones that are capable to reach the southeast United States, including all of Florida. That poses a significant security risk to the United States. So, while the president may say, hey, maybe you cannot deal with this regime, any part of this regime, it needs to change in order to make them a friend of the United States and also to relieve the suffering of the Cuban people.
And also, when you indict Raul Castro, who is the head, because Diaz-Canel is just a puppet, we're talking about only 3 or 4 members of the Castro family that I'm sure will flee with him. Because think about it, Raul is 95 years old. 95 years old is very old. Does he really want to spend or run the possibility of spending the rest of his days in a federal prison or just fleeing with the rest of his family. It's a different scenario, and I'm sure that it's going to come out great.
All right, well, we will watch and see all the permutations and combinations of what's about to transpire this afternoon. Congressman, Congresswoman, thank you so much for joining us today. Really appreciate it.
Pleasure.
Be sure to like and subscribe for all the Fox News latest on YouTube and catch full shows streaming now on Fox One.